We'll start with Sam Pittman in Arkansas. Lunsford, as you're in this conversation with us as well, 6-6, 3-5 in the SEC. Bowl game pending.
I'm gonna give a C- for Arkansas and Sam Pittman.
I would agree with that, C- because the expectations were higher than 6-6. It's a tough job, competitive, but I was expecting more, especially with KJ Jefferson back. I agree with Lunsford, C-. What about you?
Yeah, I'm going to go C, a solid C, because it's still Arkansas. I think we forget how bad that job was and how good Sam Pittman's done. I know the expectations were more, but if they played on a college campus, they beat A&M. If KJ Jefferson's healthy, they beat LSU. They would have been 8-4. It would have totally flipped, and we'd have a different opinion here. But I'm going to go solid C.
How do you do Auburn because they fired their coach?
Oh, it's at least a D if you fire your coach, right?
Yeah.
Right. So a D at least.
I'm going D.
I would just go F for Brian Harsin.
But do you factor in Carnell coming in and pulling him in a different direction, or are we just going on Brian Harsin? If we're going just Brian Harsin, it was an F. Then.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to count Cadillac for me, just because of the situation. He's put in that situation because the program was an F.
Well, and there's never a day that Auburn should be 2-6 in the SEC.
Yeah, 5-7, 2-6 in the SEC. A familiar number at Texas A&M. When you look at Texas A&M, how do you grade Jimbo Fisher? You first.
Oh, it's an F.
The win that Auburn got in the SEC was over the F, so that doesn't really make it that much better.
Yeah, I mean, it was an awful season. For them to go 5-7, have the identical record as Vanderbilt, and for the expectation to be not only, have a big season, but to win the SEC and to go to a college football playoff, and don't even go to a bowl game.
And their recruiting, I mean, what a difference it makes. I was reading somewhere last night, and you guys may find this interesting over in the chat room or as you're listening, riding around America today, that they may have the biggest drop-off from a number one class to where they end up in this class in the history of them tracking recruiting classes. They may have that big of a drop-off from one year to the next in recruiting classes. That's a little alarming if I'm a Texas A&M fan.
I think that just shows you can't buy wins because they tried last year.
Yep.
Didn't work.
That's right.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing. Elsewhere in the West, Mississippi State, the late Mike Leach, who's being remembered in just over an hour in Starkville with the public ceremony remembering the passing of Mike Leach. This year they're 8-4, 4-4 in the league. What grade do you give Mike Leach and that coaching staff there?
Well, I would go B, a solid B, too, because your three losses were to LSU, who won the SEC West, to Alabama, and to Georgia. The other loss was Kentucky. He wins his first Egg Bowl, 8-4 in Starkville. It's a good record. I go B.
Yeah, I think you're an A if you're competing for the SEC championship. They were never going to compete for the SEC championship, but you're right. The losses they had were good. I go a solid B, too.
I just pulled up to see where Texas A&M was in recruiting just as we were piling on there. They are 15th in recruiting, just ahead of TCU, just ahead of South Carolina, but still ahead of Arkansas, still ahead of Mississippi State, still ahead of Auburn, and surprisingly, quite a bit ahead of where Ole Miss is. If you're just looking at high school recruiting, I don't know where Lane Kiffin is right now does he put more in the portal or in high school, but Hugh Freeze, new to Auburn, has a better recruiting class right now, according to 24/7 Composite, than Ole Miss does. What kind of grade do you give Ole Miss?
I give Ole Miss probably C, probably a solid C. I think for the recruiting angle, a lot of that has to do with the newness of what's happening at Auburn, the excitement around what's happening at Auburn, and we'll see come February where everything actually ranks out. I know most people will sign now, but I mean overall, same record as Mississippi State. It's sitting there at 8-4. Losses to teams who were a lot better than them. We expected them to lose to. Probably expecting at least another win, but I'd say a C.
I'm going to go C-. And the reason they opened 7-0, they only beat one ranked team this year. They lose 4 of their last 5. You're supposed to get better as the season goes.
See, I almost would have flipped whoever won the Egg Bowl because I was a little disappointed in Mike Leach and Mississippi State until they won the Egg Bowl, and that sort of jumped them ahead of Ole Miss for me. Those two programs had sort of the same type season. Alabama.
I would go B. They're the last team out. But
10-2, 6-2 gets you a B.
Yeah, we grade Alabama on Alabama. I mean, to lose multiple games in a regular season, you don't see it under Nick Saban, and so for them not to get back to the SEC championship game and to maybe go to a college football playoff, it's a disappointing year, so I would go B.
I go B-, just a little under that because you do grade Alabama based on Alabama. And as much as you say they could have had 4 losses, they could have been undefeated, it's right at the average with 2 losses, and that's a B-.
Now, I think the toughest guy to grade in all of the season is what Brian Kelly did at LSU, because they still end up with 4 losses.
Yeah, but I still got to go A. And, after what they did to lose the way they lost to Florida State, who ended up being a pretty good team, their only bad loss really was the Texas A&M you couldn't really explain, and Tennessee. But in year one, to bring in a transfer quarterback that we didn't know what Jaden Daniels was going to do, for them to win the SEC in year one, I've got to give them an A.
That slips down to B+ for me.
I'm with you. I said B+ because they still lost the games they shouldn't have lost. Beating Alabama is great, but it doesn't. I mean, how many times we talked about with Auburn and with Gus Malzahn and with hiring somebody like Hugh Freeze? Well, you beat Alabama, but then you lose 3 games you're not supposed to lose. The same happened with LSU this year. Yes, they made it to the SEC championship because they got that 1 win, but then they lost games they shouldn't have lost.
Well, I mean, Tennessee, I don't have a problem with them losing that game. Tennessee, when healthy, was one of the best teams in football. Florida State, it was their first game out. They lose on a blocked extra point.
And a good team, but that Texas A&M loss in that first half at Auburn, having to battle back to win that one, I go B+ as well, but I understand your A. A+ for Georgia, is that what?
Yep.
A+ for Georgia. Can't do much better than what Kirby has done there. I think 27 now SEC regular season wins, if I'm correct about that. Vandy. I mean, I would go Clark Lee. I'd give him an A. Do you guys go that high on Clark Lee?
I went B just because you don't
B.
get to a bowl game, but still, I mean, he exceeded expectations, no doubt.
I mean, the win total was 2.5 in Vegas. He got 5.
Yeah, I mean, he doubled that. So
if you grade Alabama on Alabama, you got grade Vandy on Vandy, and so that definitely gives them at least a B.
Yeah.
Another tough one to grade for me is Eli Drinkwitz in Missouri, because I thought he was a hot seat guy coming in, and he gets a contract extension. 6-6, 3-5 in the SEC. Where are you in Missouri? A lot of people compliment him on the scare they gave to Georgia. Where do you put Eli?
Well, to me, my expectation for Missouri is 6-6, and with that said, he got a contract extension. I'm going to give him a C.
Average year 6-6 is exactly what I expect too. So I said C.
I would say don't take the bowl game you just saw into consideration for Billy Napier, because it wasn't his roster when he went to play that game. But I know you will. You'll take that Vegas Bowl loss into consideration. What do you do with Billy Napier? 6-6 before the bowl game, 6-7 afterwards. I'll remind you, the greatest coach of all time had that type of season the first year.
I'm going to go D. I mean, who did they beat this year outside of Utah to start the season?
That's a great win.
No, it is. And again, if you played it 10 times right now, Utah would win all 10.
I agree. I would say C- only because it's the first year. Outside of that, I'd drop it even lower.
Yeah, I got a D.
D for him there. What about Kentucky? See, this is a 7-5 Kentucky team. That seems very C-like to me with Kentucky.
I've got a C based on the fact that you've got what is viewed as your best quarterback since Tim Couch, possibly. A guy that's going to go in the first round. Now, we never believed that, but still, when you've got a projected first-round quarterback and you still go 7-5, I mean, they had 10 wins last year, so to drop 3 wins, I'm going to give them a C.
And you had Chris Rodriguez back for the second half of that season.
I as much as the Will Levis hype was there, obviously we hate Will Levis compared to what everybody else says, but because of that and because they were supposed to be competing for the East, I gave them a D.
Well, and they lost to Vanderbilt.
2 more in the SEC. South Carolina, Shane Beamer.
I'm going to give them an A. I mean, just the way they closed out the season, they ruined 2 seasons. They go 8-4. And to beat Tennessee and Clemson in back-to-back weeks was, I mean, that might be the most impressive back-to-back weeks of any program this college football season.
Still a B, though, because you still had – it's the same thing. You beat the teams that, you beat those teams, but you still lost other games you weren't supposed to lose.
Yeah, before you got to that point. I'd go A- on that. I'd get him somewhere between you two. And then there's Tennessee. How high do you go? And then does that South Carolina loss keep him from being an A?
I'm still going to go A, because if you would have told any Tennessee fan before the season you win 10 games, you're going to an Orange Bowl, and you beat Alabama, that's impressive.
A- only because of the South Carolina loss.